does that mean? There is no myself. An actor. Man of 1,000 faces. One for Farragut, one for Norland, one for Lila, one for the children, one... There's no myself anymore. There's nothing in the mirror.
Welcome to the Kobayashi FU. I am your captain, Tim. I am the culture war realist. I'm a rational individualist. I'm the post-scarcity objectivist. I am the alpha with nostalgia. I know the Lord of the Core. I've got the hot takes for the bot fakes. And most importantly, I am never a victim. Thanks for being here on this impromptu Off the Treks stream. Haven't done one since July. Hit the like button. Share the stream on all platforms, and chat it up today. Tell friends about the show, guys. We're going to try to do more Off the Treks. The link has been sent out. If you're watching on replay, thank you very much. Leave a comment and hit the like button. We've got some news today. We've got some other interesting news, and we're going to go into some real Star Trek as well. And we are also going to debut a new segment that should be some fun. So make sure you're sharing the stream out there on all platforms. You saw the thumbnail. You kind of know what the new news is. Of course, it's George Takei. We'll see what he's saying. Got an article pulled up here, and we'll get into that. Talk about some TNG. Continue our Season 1 episode reviews. Really hard to get through that first half of the first season. The second half a lot better. And we've said this all along. Not too bad of a debut season for a science fiction show, for a Star Trek show, but there were some stinkers in that first half of the first season for sure, and we documented why on prior Off the Treks. So make sure you go back and watch those old episodes with me and Greg, Tusk, and Bob reviewing them, because we went over exactly why. We've got the screenshots here from Trek Core ready to go later. Some great screenshots, and we're only using the DVD versions. We're not looking at the remastered stuff. We're just going to be a purist here. I think it's got to be Hamill. I think Hamill has to be worse than Takei. Absolutely. Thanks for being here, member of the channel, Real Kim Shady. We also have the all-around arbiter in the house saying howdy, because we say howdy here. Yeah, it's got to be Hamill, though. At least in the past, Takei had the pretense of being a libertarian. Hamill has just out and out always been a leftist, even though he was able to hide it more. Now, I think Takei is a fraud libertarian. But a lot of his takes in the past weren't as bad as almost any of those that come from Hamill. The only positive thing, the only good thing you see come out of Hamill is, he showed up as Luke Skywalker to talk to a kid that was dying in character. That's great stuff. But when it comes to politics, personal liberty, stuff like that, he leaves much to be desired. So Hamill is definitely worse than Takei in my estimation. Jock Nerdy, another Northern California brother, is in the house. What is going on? Hope you're doing well. A rare daytime stream. I am taking a vacation day for my birthday this week. not really a vacation day. We get a freebie and you can use it for your birthday or some other holiday that the company doesn't officially celebrate, like the federal holidays pretty much at this point. So rare daytime stream, but I saw this in the news and I wanted to talk about this stuff. So share the link out there on all platform. Wherever it is, guys. X, Facebook groups, wherever. We can go into this right now. We also later have a CBR article that just came out a couple of days ago that I wanted to get into as well. So this here is NJ.com, New Jersey. Star Trek icon urges Americans to fight this madness. Quotation marks here. And holy shit, this dark mode for this particular website's horrible. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to have to transfer this over to an Edge tab. Usually Brave, this dark mode is pretty damn good, but this is horrible. Throw this over here on this screen. All right. Star Trek icon calls Trump deportation plan madness. Wait a minute, have they... They must have changed the headline. Because that happens. Like, if you'll see one version of an article, then later on in the day, or several days later, they've changed the title. This is something that happens, guys. So you saw it right in front of us here. Let me make sure this is the same one. Let's see. Published 11/14. Updated 12:30 p.m. I assume that means Eastern Time. So they've already changed the headline there. Hang on a minute. For some odd reason, it's wanting me to log in Edge, but not in Brave. You can see the different headline there. I'll just have to select the text like this. We go back to this screen. Damn it. All right. Actor George Takei, best known for his portrayal of helmsman Hikaru Sulu in the original Star Trek television series, has spoken often about Japanese internment and how his family was rounded up at gunpoint and imprisoned in concentration camps during World War II out of fear that they and thousands of Asian Americans were Japanese sympathizers. On Monday, to mark President's Day in the midst of a presidential election, Takei tied his experience as a 5-year-old to bigotry he sees today, particularly in former President Donald Trump's promise to round up undocumented immigrants if he is reelected. In a lengthy and emotional post on Twitter, Takei urged others to fight this madness and help keep America from repeating the mistakes of its past. On this day 82 years ago, February 19, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the height of insanity of racism after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, signed Executive Order 9066. It ordered all Japanese Americans in the West Coast to be summarily rounded up and imprisoned within 10 barbed wire prison camps with no charges, no trial, no due process. One day, a few months later, we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway, carrying rifles with shiny bayonets on them. They stopped up. That doesn't even make sense. They stopped up the porch right in front of our window and banged on the front door. My father answered, and one of the soldiers pointed the rifle at him, right in front of us, and ordered us out of our home. I had just turned 5 in April. It was May when they came to take us away. My father gave my brother Henry and me 2 heavy suitcases, and we brought them out into the driveway and waited for our mother to come out. When she did, she had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. That is one morning that is seared into my memory. I will never be able to forget all the innocent people, my family included, who had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, most of who were law-abiding U.S. citizens who were suddenly categorized as enemy aliens. Today, I hear terrifying words from political leaders that once more raise the specter of what happened before. Right here in America, Donald Trump and his allies are talking about rounding up 11 million people and putting them in mass detention camps before deporting them. There won't be time for due process to sort out who is documented and who is not. Homes will be lost, businesses too. Families will be torn apart, lives will be ruined over fear and ignorance, all to serve the ambitions and agendas of politicians. I know because I lived through it. I say never again. Not while I have 1 ounce of fight still left in me. Join me, fight this madness. Help keep America from repeating the mistakes of its past. So, if you look at this, guys, Trump is what, like 45 to 50% in the polls against any Democrat opponent right now. So he's basically saying, if you vote for Trump, or at least you don't oppose Trump, then you're part of the madness. And then if you go to the 11 million people being rounded up without due process and deported, I think that's a lot different than rounding up people and putting them in concentration camps. And we can talk for a really long time about whether or not the internment was right. There have been entire series of books written on that topic. Was it right or was it wrong? Completely different topic. The topic here is whether or not deporting illegal immigrants that we see on live television now in 2024 streaming through the border should be deported. And when he says serving the agendas of politicians, what is that? To get votes because they want to do what their constituents want? Stopping the influx of illegal immigrants, especially on the Texas border. We've seen it all on live television. We've talked about it on streams and on social media, guys. There's a big difference here. So, Trump or any politician, I've seen my congressmen and others out there on ads saying this is what they're going to do if elected or what they're going to support if elected. They can read the room. They can read their constituents' needs and see their fears for the future. And this is what they want. Has nothing to do with the race, ethnicity, language of the people coming in. It's the lack of process around that when you talk due process. We see the Border Patrol just allowing people to stream in, and then we almost have a civil war when the Texas National Guard tries to put a stop to it. Big difference here between interning U.S. citizens and promising to round up illegal immigrants, and he's full of crap when he says there won't be due process around checking to see who is documented and not. There will be. And deporting them. Two differences there, guys. Huge differences between what he's saying happened to him when he was a child, which sounds horrible, versus what would happen now. And the reasons behind them, very different as well. Chase Hedges is with us. Red Hoodwinked is in the house. They make it sound like we are sending them to the slaughterhouse. Yeah, and we're not. We're not at all. Two big differences there. What he's saying, if it happened that way, it's bad enough. I mean, it could have been worse, but that would have been bad enough, especially when you're a 5-year-old child. But You're living in your home and you're comfortable and you know you've done nothing wrong. The illegal immigrants know they have done something wrong. What do they think is going to happen? They're going to go to the local taqueria and just round up people because of the color of their skin and then take them to a processing center and drop them off like in Mexicali or something like that across the border? It won't happen that way. Two different things. So you talk about somebody stirring stuff up for their agendas. You've got politicians, and we all despise politicians. We all have a certain amount of disdain for them, right? But the ones that are promising to do what I dare say most of America wants versus what he's trying to say for his own agenda to fearmonger so that people will vote the way he wants them to vote. Well, there's the agenda right there. There's the agenda right there. We got OG Star Wars, Alora in the house, reminding everybody to smash the like button and share the stream on all platforms. Barely moving around. It's actually Monday morning. So I think you're off. Maybe you slept through part of the weekend or something, but yeah, it's actually Monday morning. So oh, you worry me sometimes. I believe his family was sent to the internment camp in southeastern Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. We had several across the nation during World War II. So that's what's going on with that. Again, his agenda versus what he's claiming as politicians. And arguably, 46 to 50% of America, right, for wanting the law to be enforced, for wanting logic to be enforced, not allowing people to just pour across the border and present a danger to us. Because what if somebody comes across the border and commits a crime and they're not documented? How do you track them? How do you know who they are? Pretty frightening. Yeah, you're way off. Like Sunday and Monday are not the same things. Absolutely not the same things. So this kind of behavior is disgusting. Just capitalizing on a day of remembrance and trying to influence the election based on fear and an unfounded fear. Let's check out comicbookresources.com, CBR. What fans don't understand about Star Trek the original series. Star Trek debuted in 1966 with William Shatner leading the Enterprise as Captain Kirk. Yet, there's a lot fans get wrong about Gene Roddenberry's show. I love these bullet points they all have now. It makes it kind of really simple to see what their points are. Star Trek TOS was a modestly produced TV show in the 1960s that grew into a massive pop culture franchise. The show reflected the era in both positive and negative ways, capturing the optimistic energy of the 1960s, but also displaying dated aspects in terms of diversity and gender representation. Can't wait to see what they say about that. TOS faced limitations in pushing its desired characters and stories, resulting in issues with representation and objectification of women, which have become more evident over time. You mean they've become more evident because society, Hollywood, the education system has pushed stuff like this extremist feminism that says women wearing short skirts is sexist. Not because it was always that way, but because they have tried to guide society and socially engineer society into having those beliefs. Few, if any, shows in television history have had the influence of the original Star Trek, which aired from 1966 to 69 on NBC. Creator Gene Roddenberry sold it as Wagon Train to the Stars, evoking a popular TV Western at the time that has since been eclipsed by the space opera that it inspired. What started as an interesting new wrinkle on the Buck Rogers formula eventually became a phenomenon, inspiring multiple spin-offs and movies as well as a bonanza of ancillary products. Today, Star Trek is one of the biggest franchises in pop culture, with multiple shows currently in production and more on the way. It never was that way before. I mean, it's bad enough if you have several shows going, watering down the desire for a certain franchise, but when you have several going that are bad and are not faithful to the original, that makes it even worse. You got Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks and that other cartoon and promises of other stuff as well. All of it stemmed from the comparatively modest efforts of Star Trek, the original series. Perhaps because of that, it's easy for modern audiences to scoff at the show's more dated material. It was very much a product of its time, and not all of it has aged well, especially in light of diversity and gender representation. I'm not even going to go any further at this point, because here's what I want to point out. The crew of the ship, we've talked about it for decades. Roddenberry made a very purposeful decision to make a diverse cast, whether it was a black woman on the bridge as an officer. Let's have a Russian during the height of the Cold War. Let's have an Asian man driving the ship nonetheless. Let's have a Scottish engineer. Let's have an alien as the first officer and science officer. Need I go on? And in the background, you saw many women as nurses, guest stars with women that were geniuses. It was all there from the beginning. There were no issues with diversity and gender representation. Whoever's writing this, we'll check on that later, is an idiot, and they don't know what they're talking about. Many of its stories and ideas reflect ideas that are no longer pertinent, and its trappings are often cheesy artifacts of the decade that produced it. None of that diminished its importance or influence, though it can sometimes surprise contemporary audiences approaching the show for the first time. Many of its eccentricities and problematic components can be explained, if not excused, by looking at the series of terms of the pop culture environment that created it. That allows the brilliant, groundbreaking aspects of it to stand out while providing proper context to the parts of Star Trek TOS that aren't as timeless as its creators might like. Sounds like shit. Star Trek really was just a TV show. Gene Roddenberry wanted to elevate science fiction when he proposed TOS to network executives. Before then, the genre had largely been regulated to children's programming featuring simplistic storylines and elementary visual effects. That's not true at all. There was the Twilight Zone that was extremely cerebral. You had there's one called Men into Space. Started out as like a realistic portrayal of astronauts going into space, having real science problems, character development, stuff like that. Very serious, cerebral show. More akin to the original pilot of Star Trek than anything that came after that. So when they say largely been relegated, I don't know what you mean by largely, but yeah, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, the serials in the movie theaters, maybe some of that was dumbed down. But science fiction in general, from its inception, was cerebral. And that's the way that it was written, whether it was in print or on screen. Roddenberry intended for Star Trek to speak to bigger ideas and show the genre's real potential as serious storytelling on a weekly basis. It ultimately succeeded far beyond even his expectations, resulting in one of the most enduring franchises in pop culture. At the time, however, it wasn't a cultural phenomenon, and no one working on the show had any inkling of how successful it would be. Roddenberry and his creative team were trying to make one show on a network filled with them, dedicated to occupying 1 hour in a weekly primetime schedule and nothing more. While they endeavored to tell smart stories with strong scripts, they were still adhering to established formulas. Every episode was a standalone drama with little follow-through, and they could often be silly or nonsensical. Perhaps most noticeably, the universe wasn't nearly as fleshed out as it became. Enemies like the Klingons and Romulans served the expedience of the story at hand, with little attention paid to how they might fit into a more expansive IP. I remember them being mentioned, like Klingons, like, oh no, we better avoid here. I wish I could go back and find the episodes because we've heard there's Klingon activity, but they didn't actually appear yet until many episodes later. So there was something of an ongoing mention of the state of the galaxy and the political situation with the Federation, or USPA, the United Earth Space Probe Agency, as it was called early on in the series. So there was definitely something there. But it was by no means a serialized show. It was very much episodic, where they would resolve the problem at hand and move on to the next story. But over time, Kirk, Spock, McCoy did develop that relationship to where you could tell it was different at the end of season 3 than it was at the beginning of season 1. And that was probably something to do with the actors as well, right? The Federation itself was often depicted in such terms as well. Notions like canon and continuity were only loosely considered simply because no one imagined that the show would still be watched and enjoyed decades after the fact. And blah, blah, blah. The original series was very much a product of its time, just as Star Trek TNG was a product of the 1980s and Discovery reflects the late 2010s. That's the problem. The latter is true. That's what Discovery is. That's what I was saying earlier. When you take modern day politics and you inject it into your television show like Discovery does, that's what makes it horrible and very dated and not relevant in any other decade. TOS, they said earlier in one of the other paragraphs that, oh, it's still relevant today because basically people are able to like what was good about it. Which, when it comes to the creation of the universe, maybe not every story, there was a lot to like about it because it was timeless. I think they're going to tell us exactly what they mean here, and I already have my counterpoint all loaded up. The first show arrived amid the turbulence of the 1960s with the civil rights movement, encountering stiff resistance and the war in Vietnam, tearing the country in two. In the midst of it all, the Apollo mission was literally shooting for the moon. The original series' greatest strength was tapping into the optimistic energy that NASA's efforts embodied, while revealing a brighter tomorrow that lay beyond the strife and turmoil of the era. That naturally came with other aspects of the 1960s that haven't aged nearly as well. It embraced pop art in its imagery and visual look, resulting in outlandish and sometimes cheesy moments that look quite creaky to modern eyes. The bright colors were very much by design. Color television was a recent development, and the network wanted to play up the benefits with the flashy aesthetic. that also extended to cultural mores and expectations that haven't aged as well. I don't even know what this word is. White men still tended to save the day, with everyone else relegated to supporting duties. How many times did Spock save the day? An Alien, how many times did that happen? How many times did Sulu take command of the Enterprise? No examples here at all. If you're going to throw stuff like this out there, then have some statistics. Watch all 79 episodes and tell us how many times these things happened and what the percentage was. Fight scenes could be stiff and often ridiculous. No, they were great. While many of the effects were beyond shoddy, for example, an environmental suit in an early episode was clearly assembled from a plastic shower curtain. Such qualities didn't raise many eyebrows when they originally aired, but have since become far more prominent simply because people still watch TOS for many more of its contemporary shows that were guilty of the same problems. It wasn't allowed to go as far as it wanted. Many of TOS's shortcomings came about simply because the series couldn't push the kinds of characters and stories that it really wanted to. Instead, it was forced to curtail issues such as representation and diversity in favor of prevailing norms at the time. The most egregious example of this is the way it handles women, which is both very progressive for the era, exactly, and hopelessly misogynistic to modern eyes. Not really, not to anyone reasonable. The show arrived during the rise of second-wave feminism, which TOS reflected by depicting more women in authority positions, often working alongside men on the USS Enterprise. Despite those advances, female characters were often objectified and portrayed as prizes to be won. Where's the example? They were also relegated to passive victim roles more often than not. The biggest example, and what about now? What about in real life? What about in real life? The stars of Hollywood relegating themselves to victim roles, right? In real life. Self-victimhood. Not because a writer wrote them that way. The biggest example is Nichelle Nichols, who famously played Lieutenant Uhura on the series and was intended for a much larger role. Roddenberry intended to make the character third in command and seen on the captain's chair whenever Kirk and Spock were on an away mission. Her role was scaled back because the network had an issue with depicting a black woman in a position of authority. Instead, Montgomery Scott became the commander when the captain and first officer were away, which made no sense since this normal station in engineering was on the other side of the ship. So you're telling me location should tell you who the second officer is? Tell me you don't know anything about the military without telling me you don't know anything about the military. Because of this, Nichols was close to quitting the series after the first season before a famous conversation with civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. convinced her to remain. That arrived after the series' original pilot, The Cage, which I love, was rejected in part because it depicted a woman as the ship's second in command. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember ever hearing the network told Roddenberry to do that. It might have been Roddenberry himself, which may still serve the point of the author of this article. But I don't remember it ever being the network that said that can't happen with Uhura. At the end of the day, the communications officer is the communications officer, right? The chief engineer is going to be the second officer in that scenario. I mean, would he have also made Uhura the chief engineer or something else, chief of security? I doubt it. The problem has loomed larger with age, as a series ostensibly depicting women in positions of responsibility and authority often reduce them to eye candy. The The franchise, they mean, has improved in leaps and bounds in the ensuing years, with subsequent series delivering far more prominent parts for women, and the likes of Catherine Janeway and Michael Burnham serving as the captains of their respective crews. So, don't forget that the TOS movies depicted female captains, right? They depicted brilliant, genius women as guest stars. It happened. So that's what they say about women. And that's the end of it. They don't go into any of the representation. Like, okay, let's just cut the article short here. Trying to see if they say anything about the skirts. Yeah, just what a horrible article. Like, tell me it's a slow news day on Star Trek without telling me it's a slow news day on Star Trek. And this is written by Robert Vox. 1,846 articles, doesn't have a real picture. He tells us his lucky numbers. Now, this is interesting. Original Twilight Zone, he's a fan of. We talked about that earlier. Early example of science fiction, of real science fiction. Nothing else really interesting about this guy. But just, what a horrible article. Like, this is nothing but a White Knight article. That's all it is. Again, you know, the show in the 1960s that really kicked off casting the people you wanted to cast, regardless of their sex or their skin color, is being criticized for not going far enough. And he gives one example of them, where's that section at, wasn't allowed to go as far as it wanted. I'll tell you some other ways that's true. Like, Roddenberry wanted to do a lot more with, like, sex stuff, and the network said no. I have that over here in a couple of the different nonfiction books on the series. That was for sure a thing, but I think he got away with exactly what he wanted to get away with, telling morality plays that were smartly written, not anvilicious, like the garbage that you see now where these short treks explaining what pronoun usage is and all this shit. Right on the nose, right? He was able to smartly tell stories in the first and second season because he was largely uninvolved in the third season. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but that kind of tells about the quality of that season, reveals a lot. He was able to tell morality plays using writers that could tell stories to get a point across without just getting that huge hammer and hitting you over the head with it. He achieved what he wanted to. I never heard he wasn't allowed to go as far as he wanted. Are we ever allowed to go as far as we want? And what we do, we have to make certain compromises. Number one, maybe with yourself, to say, wow, I'm trying to tell this story. I'm trying to make this point, but it's not coming across right. And it's a little too direct. I'm going to scale it back a little bit, and maybe people, readers, viewers will be more receptive to that message. People do that themselves, and I think that's what happened with Roddenberry. He told the story he wanted to tell. He kicked off the universe that he wanted to kick off. When it comes to the movies, he was largely uninvolved after the motion picture. But again, the universe he created and was carried on by many other people. Look at TNG, another diverse cast, right? But it was never mentioned. It was never pointed out. All right, you know, here we go. I'm going to call Geordi up here. Hey, Geordi, the black blind man, can you, like, fly us out of here? That's what they do in New Treks, and they have done that in New Treks. Right on the nose. Star Wars Scran in the house. Gender representation, didn't it have both? That's my whole point. It did. It was one of the first. Yeah, this is why you do your homework. Number one, if you don't know it, you don't know it, right? But you do it so we don't do exactly what we're doing and make you look like an idiot. Like you don't know what you're talking about. This is like an incomplete article. I expected it to be a lot longer with more examples. But he basically gives one that, he wanted to make Uhura like second officer, but they wouldn't let her. I'm going to go through the books later and see if that's the truth, because I don't think it is. Alora says, these pop culture sites are so disgusting. It just shares how intellectually dishonest they are and how they are taking it up the ass by Hollywood puppets. Yeah, exactly. They Slow News Day, they wrote this to get an article out there, and they know people will read it and accept it at face value without even pushing back, researching, or asking people who already know, like us. Happens all the time with all the franchises. I see uh, Marvel, DC, I see obviously Star Wars. I see starting to see more Doctor Who ones. Oh, guess what? You know, if you don't like Doctor Who now, you've never liked it because it's always been this way. A lot of garbage like that. I love that. Here's the point I wanted to make with this. I just remembered what it was. Like, okay, so you don't like Discovery, right? Here's their argument. You don't like Discovery, Picard, all this shit. Then you don't like Star Trek because Star Trek has always been this way. But it hasn't always been this way according to you guys in this article, right? So which is it? It can't have been this way in the 60s when we did like it. So did you change it or didn't you change it? I guess, whatever day it is, whatever narrative you want to fit for that day, that's what matters. It's kind of like my Star Wars video, one of my recent George Lucas videos, where he says he and his friends like to make movies that they liked, right? So if you don't like that kind of movie and you wanted to change Star Wars, then you didn't like Star Wars to begin with. Same point here. Like, this was Star Trek. If you had to change it, then you didn't like real Star Trek to begin with. Shit. This is ridiculous. Open up another browser here. Do-do-do. Trying to see if I can find something really quick. Alright, there's not much out there, but let me go ahead and hit the intro for this new segment here. Alright, we are going to take a look at, and this is probably better for a night segment, not at noon Central Time in America, but we'll do it nonetheless here. We're going to check out what people are doing around Star Trek Live right now on YouTube. I'll tell you what, this search algorithm is wild. Yeah, show me a G.I. Joe episode on Hasbro's YouTube channel because I searched for Star Trek. Make sure I hit the search button here. Yeah, I did. Show me the Japan news here. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, there's us right there. That's cool. People playing No Man's Sky. So no one's live talking Star Trek right now. Let's go to all. Red Letter Media had a video on TNG mistakes. Can't stand Red Letter. Mistletoe movie reviews. Wrath of Khan movie review. No views 10 minutes ago. What is this channel? 2,000 subscribers. Probably need to share the audio. I just want to see what people are saying about this. Greg and I did a stream coming up on 3 years ago where, what is the name of that? Cinema Sins, like, went after the TOS movies, and we broke down why they were wrong. That was a pretty fun stream. All right, I don't want to get claimed here. See where this guy starts talking.
Length of the movie from Annihilation and movie out of the 6 with the original crew. I myself am on the fence since I love The Undiscovered Country just as much as I like this movie. But Wrath of Khan isn't just a Star Trek movie. It is the movie that probably saved Star Trek from Annihilation. And
he's exactly correct on this. I've read Shatner's books, and he states in no uncertain terms that this movie did save it. If this movie hadn't been successful, it probably would have been the end of Star Trek, or at least for a very long time. It would have been seen as a risk by Paramount executives to do anything with the property. So that's why they paid so much attention to it. They brought in a new scriptwriter. They kicked Roddenberry out. They still paid him, but they kicked him out. They had to have this be successful. So he's right about that.
Truly gave it that genesis that it needed. I'm Mephisto, like, share, and subscribe because this is my review of the movie Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Skip around here.
Suppose they went nowhere.
Then this will be your big chance to get away from it all.
I'm gonna go into some spoiler territory because it's very important
No such thing as spoilers decades later, sorry.
to this movie. If you don't want to know, I thank you for watching. The most touching scene in this movie is, of course, the death of Spock. At the time, Nimoy was ready to leave this character behind. It was the best character he played, but it was also the character he was ready to let go of. The scene, and I will recommend it to anyone.
Alright, so he liked the movie. Nothing really interesting there. We're going to have to do Landing Party at night when, like, a lot of the shield channels are streaming and see what they're saying. Kind of like a live EFAP. Ugh, I totally forgot about this. About the fake Kirk appearing on Discovery. Oh, there we are again. Nothing really interesting, but that'll be the new segment, and it will be a lot funner when we're streaming at night, and we can just EFAP Star Trek streamers. Alright, guys. We're going to get into TNG discussion. I don't know the last time you guys watched TNG. It's out there. I think it's still on Paramount Plus. And obviously DVD, Blu-ray. Blu-ray has the remastered special effects, all that stuff. So where we left off from July, because yes, it's been since July that we've had an Off the Trek stream, was Coming of Age. And this is one of the rare, in my opinion, good Wesley Crusher episodes where he has to take his Starfleet Academy entrance exam. This is the same episode where this guy asks Picard if he wants to be the commandant of Starfleet Academy. And then this is where they started getting like really arcy, ARCY, and serialized, because you'll recognize that guy right there, right? And the Admiral, because they'll show up later on in the season as the compromised Starfleet officers by the bug race from Conspiracy. So they had a little bit of a build here, which was interesting. So, of course, here's the thing with Wesley Crusher, the character Wesley Crusher. Why so many people didn't like the character. Number one, early on in the season, they had the Naked Now episode where he's, drunk, affected by the virus, and he's acting like a complete idiot. So right off the bat, people didn't like him. But then for the rest of the season, which was very much, to borrow a term from that article we read, a product of its time, he was very angsty, like a lot of the teens and shows around that time. Very angsty and just uncomfortable and awkward, and I don't think Star Trek fans wanted that in their new show, but they got it anyway. Case in point here, he beams down to the planet so that he can start getting ready for the test, and look who shows up, a hottie around his age, so there's already a dilemma for him there. And then, of course, a Benzite is one of the other students. And they start taking the tests. And toward the end of the episode, it turns into a conversation around, it's less about how much do you know about warp field geometry and stuff like that, but more about command ability, like dealing with this guy that is actually a near human, and one of the students recognizes that, well, I better deal with him this way because I know what species he is. So that's more of a leadership quality. They get into that kind of stuff, and then they start talking about the psych test, like, oh no, what's going to happen with my psych test, right? And then they spring the psych test on him out of nowhere, and Wesley has to rescue his fellow students from the room right here. And then, hey, that was the psych test. Like, this guy here didn't want to leave, and he's like, come on, you got to go. It's all psychological. So he winds up making the decision, and he drags him out of there. And then the officer here shows up and says, okay, you passed the psych test. So not too bad of a science fiction episode, a character development episode, but still, even after this, people couldn't stand Wesley. I'd say this one, the one I talked about on X the other day, First Duty, where he is in Starfleet Academy and there's a hearing an inquiry around the accident he and his squad mates had. And then another pretty decent Wesley episode is the one where he and the captain are down on the planet and the captain's injured. I think that's called Final Mission. But beyond that, like, most of the Wesley episodes are just garbage. Like season 2, he's horrible. He doesn't have his mother around and all that stuff. So this episode, not too bad. And the Benzite, the alien student, says he never would have been able to figure it out and pass that test because the Benzites are so rigid in their thinking. So, pretty good Star Trek episode. And then again, I like the foreshadowing of the conspiracy guys. That was kind of cool and a new thing for Star Trek in 1987 for sure. They were trying to do something different. So, that episode there, I don't know. I give it maybe a 5.5 out of 10, which for me is pretty high. It's not a horrible episode when you compare it to some of these bad episodes in season 1, which I would give like a 1 out of 10, like Code of Honor and shit like that. Like this one where the Admiral gets old. Just horrible. And then it gets better and better because this episode, Heart of Glory. Fantastic stuff. So they come across a Klingon ship. And we kind of find out. Well, let me back up here. So TNG season 1 started, right? And the audience, all we knew is that Worf is back there. Does that mean that the Federation now has the Klingon Empire as a member? What does that mean? We didn't know a lot about the character. So this episode establishes a lot that, hey, there is a peace treaty. They're not a member of the Federation, and Worf isn't really from the Klingon Empire. He was orphaned and raised by humans, all that stuff. But what we do find out is that not every Klingon is on board with that treaty, nor have they been for decades. So these are kind of like renegades, the Klingons in this episode. They're renegades. Enterprise comes across them, but they don't realize that. We learn a lot about the TNG Klingon culture, because if you'll remember, coming out of TOS, totally different look to the aliens, and what we knew of them. They mention honor a few times. Then you got the movies. You have Christopher Lloyd playing his character. You've got Star Trek 6 that wouldn't come out for another 4 years, and that was all largely built on what we saw right here, right? So really all you had was TOS in the movies. You had expanded universe material like the role-playing game from FASA, which was they built the Klingon culture off of the John Ford book, and I think John Ford actually wrote the Klingons source book for FASA. But his amazing book really established something based on what he had seen in TOS and the movies, that, hey, this is an honorable society, even though they're adversarial and all that. Well, this show kind of threw that out and did its own thing. They still did the honor thing, and I think they were influenced by some of the expanded universe material, like the FASA role-playing game. But they did their own thing, and starting with this episode, really. So these guys beam aboard, and man, they have a lot of screenshots for this episode. So one of them dies, and of course they do the scream, right? The death scream, which was new. We'd never seen anything like that out of the Klingons. And then they start trying to influence Worf to kind of take their side. They're revealing that they're renegade Klingons. Then they try to take over the ship. Have some gun battle here, which was pretty cheesy, to be honest. Pretty calm look for getting hit right there, isn't it? Got Tasha Yar with the dustbuster there, getting her womanly duties done, vacuuming the bridge, or engineering, wherever they're at there. Yeah, those first season phasers were different than second and beyond. They literally look like a dustbuster. They changed up the look of them. Like if you look at this, got like the larger opening, flatter top. The later seasons they were angular, more like a trapezoidal shape, and then the phaser beam aperture was much smaller. So I think people said they looked like a dustbuster. That's why they changed the look of them. So Worf winds up fighting the leader. He dies, he falls through the glass, and of course he gets the scream. Then they talk to the real Klingons, their allies. That's kind of the end of the episode. It was good, like a good character episode, because up until that point, Worf was pretty much a background character. They claimed that they didn't have any intention at the very start of giving him a larger role. I don't know whether or not I believe that. I think what they probably intended was, we'll throw him back there, and if people start talking about him, then we'll give him more to do. That's my firm belief. And that's exactly what happened. It's like, hey, why is there a Klingon back there? Okay, second half of the first season, let's give him his own episode. I think that's what happened. I could be completely wrong, but that's my belief. So another good episode, back to back. I'd give this one, I dare say, a 6.5 out of 10, which again for me is pretty high, because my favorite TNG episodes, I'd probably give them a 9, no higher than a 9, not even a 9.5, and there are probably only 3 or 4 of those. So a 6.5 is pretty good for me when it comes to an episode ranking, but I would go out there and watch these two guys. Coming up next, let's see, Arsenal of Freedom, the planet that has like the automated weapons selling system, and then Symbiosis, like one race is enslaving another using a drug. Had a lot of promise, but we'll get into that when we get there. Only like 6 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until we're at the end of the first season. So hopefully at some point Greg can rejoin me and give his thoughts on some of these later episodes. RJ William is with us. I wanted to do a recommendation of the show. I always have a book or a movie or something to recommend. This is one that I've had. I bought in the Sherwood Mall in Stockton, California in the late 80s. It's a fun book. It came out a few years before that as part of the promotion of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, and it's Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise. Inside of it, just all kinds of cool stuff, like diagrams of the ships, inside the ship, uniform, rank insignia. Look at that. Different rooms on the Enterprise, of the movie Enterprise, I might add. It's kind of like a follow-up to Franz Joseph's Guide to Star Trek, Starfleet, that came out unofficial in the, I believe, early 70s. Then they made it official. So really fun book. Get it. Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise. You can find it in used bookstores for a few dollars. Maybe not in great condition, but you don't really need it in good condition to see all the cool pictures and read all the lore. All right, guys. I think we've hit everything. If you're watching on replay and you've lasted this long, thank you very much. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out. Want to try and do more Star Trek. There's a lot more going on with Star Trek than we think. I don't think it gets the coverage it needs. A lot of the channels that used to do a good job with a larger audience of criticizing it have been compromised, in my estimation, possibly bought off by the studio, or at least bribed by the studio with certain access. So we're here to criticize it as we should. We're here to defend and promote real Star Trek, and we always will be. Nothing but integrity here at Open Airlock Policy, guys. So, with that being said, thanks for being here. Hit the like button on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Tell friends. And we'll probably see you next on Friday night for the spacing. Have a good Monday.